I heard the scream before I saw her. It was sharp, panicked, my daughter's voice cutting through the morning calm like shattered glass. I dropped my coffee and ran outside barefoot, heart pounding so violently I thought it would burst. At first, I didn't see her. Just a mess of movement near the construction site that had mysteriously appeared in front of our unit that week, ropes, orange cones, a deep cement pit where our ramp used to be. Then I saw the workers frozen mid-pour, wide-eyed, staring down into the pit. And then I saw her, Ava, my baby, my disabled daughter, half buried in thick, wet cement up to her chest, arms flailing, face streaked with tears, her little pink hoodie soaked in gray sludge. She was stuck, suffocating. I screamed her name as I pushed past the barricade, slipping and falling to my knees in the cement, trying to dig her out with trembling hands. "What are you doing?" I shrieked at the crew, but no one answered. They looked stunned, terrified, even, and then I heard her, Karen, standing off to the side in her pressed white blazer and wedge heels, arms crossed, lips curled in that smug, familiar sneer. "Keep pouring," she snapped. She shouldn't have been there in the first place. My head whipped toward her. I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. I thought maybe I misheard. Maybe the chaos had scrambled the words in my mind. But then she said it again, louder. "Just finish the job." She was trespassing on HOA property. One of the workers, a younger guy with trembling hands, stepped back. "Ma'am, there's a kid. She's still in there." Karen rolled her eyes like he was the problem. "And whose fault is that? You think it's my job to babysit children who don't know how to follow rules?" My blood ran cold. I screamed for someone to call 911. Another neighbor came running out with a blanket, yelling at the workers to stop. Ava was gasping now, her voice hoarse, and I could see the panic setting into her eyes, the realization that she couldn't move, that the cement was swallowing her. I held her face in my hands and whispered, "Mommy's here. I've got you. I've got you," over and over as we waited for the ambulance. My hands were covered in cement. My legs were burning from the chemical mix. But I didn't care. I just needed her to breathe, to stay awake, to survive. The EMTs arrived and had to use tools to break apart the drying concrete. And all the while, Karen stood back with her arms folded like this was a mere inconvenience. She didn't help. She didn't cry. She didn't even look surprised. And that's when I knew it wasn't a mistake. She knew my daughter was there, and she told them to pour anyway. Before the cement, before the barricades and the courtrooms and the headlines, there was just me and Ava and the simple dream of a safe, peaceful life. Ava was born with spina bifida. From the moment she came into the world, doctors gave me a long list of what she'd never do. Never walk, never run, never live without assistance. But they didn't know my daughter. Ava was the kind of child who made strangers cry in grocery stores just by smiling at them. Her laugh was loud and unapologetic, her joy defiant. She didn't crawl, she rolled. She didn't stumble, she soared in her little red wheelchair that she decorated herself with glitter and stickers. Every scraped elbow and bruised knee was a badge of independence. And I was her mother, her caretaker, her warrior. Her father left before her first surgery, overwhelmed by the weight of a life that wouldn't fit into neat little boxes. I was 26, broke, terrified, but determined. For years, we lived in tiny apartments, jumping from rental to rental, always on the hunt for something more accessible, something safer, something we could finally call home. Most places had narrow hallways, broken elevators, or landlords who weren't comfortable renting to someone with medical equipment. I learned to build ramps from plywood and screws, to carry Ava up 3 flights of stairs when the elevator failed, to smile through exhaustion because there was no one else to lean on. But still, we dreamed. When we finally got approved for the housing program that offered subsidized access to a newer development in a so-called inclusive HOA neighborhood, I cried for an hour. The photos showed wide sidewalks, smooth driveways, single-story homes with ramps already built in. There was a park nearby, a grocery store just 2 blocks down, and a school that promised accessible learning spaces. I was told the HOA kept everything orderly, peaceful, and family-friendly. I thought that meant safety. I thought it meant acceptance. I was wrong. The day we moved in, Ava wheeled herself up the newly paved path to our front door and shouted, "It looks like a castle." I laughed. I was so full of hope. For once, we weren't in a building that smelled like mildew. For once, I didn't have to strap a ramp to the back of my minivan just to get inside our own house. The neighbors waved politely. One even brought muffins. Ava made chalk drawings on the sidewalk. She wore her freedom like wings. And for a while, it felt like we could finally breathe, but the complaints started almost immediately. At first, they were subtle. Notes left on our porch. Please don't leave toys in the yard. It ruins curb appeal. Then came the letters from the HOA. Children's sidewalk art is not permitted as it creates visual clutter. Ava's drawings were just rainbows and stick figures, but apparently even joy was regulated. I shrugged it off. Every community had its rules, but it got worse. One day, I found Ava crying. She said a mean lady yelled at her for riding her chair too fast down the sidewalk. I asked which lady. She pointed across the street to a woman in perfectly pressed slacks, trimming roses with the precision of a surgeon. "That's Karen," another neighbor whispered later when I asked around. "She's particular. President of the HOA." I try to laugh it off. Everyone has a Karen, right? But this one was different. She didn't just dislike us, she watched us. I'd catch her staring from her window when Ava played in the driveway. I once saw her measuring the distance between our trash bins and the curb, like she was just waiting for us to slip up. Then came the ramp, the wooden slope I had added to the side entrance to help Ava get inside smoothly. I had cleared it with the previous property manager. But one morning, I found a bright orange violation notice stapled to our front door. Unapproved exterior modification. Must be removed within 10 days. I panicked. That ramp was the only way Ava could enter without risking a fall. I called the HOA office. They said a resident concern had prompted a review. When I asked who reported it, they wouldn't say, but I already knew. I saw Karen that same afternoon, standing across the street with her arms folded. She didn't wave. She just stared. That was the moment I realized we weren't welcome, that everything we did, every inch of space we occupied, was a problem in her perfect little kingdom. But I wasn't going to leave. Not this time. I had fought too hard to give Ava a life worth living, and if Karen wanted a war over ramps and chalk drawings, then she picked the wrong mother to battle. I just didn't know how far she was willing to go. Karen didn't storm into our lives. She slithered in quietly under the guise of politeness and community order. She was the kind of woman who introduced herself with a laminated HOA pamphlet instead of a handshake. The first time we met, she stood on our porch while Ava was drawing butterflies on the driveway with sidewalk chalk. Karen smiled tightly, the corners of her mouth twitching like it physically hurt her to appear pleasant. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, her tone dipped in artificial sweetness. "I just wanted to make sure you receive the HOA guidelines. We take community aesthetics very seriously here." I smiled, thanked her, and didn't think much of it. After all, maybe she was just passionate about neat lawns and matching paint colors. But even in that first meeting, there was something unsettling, something rigid behind her eyes, like she had memorized every line of the rulebook and carried it like scripture. Over the following weeks, her appearances became more frequent. She'd show up during Ava's playtime, linger at the edge of our yard, make comments that sounded like suggestions but carried the weight of veiled threats. "That ramp you installed," she said once, casually inspecting it like a building inspector, "it's not HOA approved. You really should have submitted a request form first. Wouldn't want someone to trip." She always emphasized the word someone, as if Ava wasn't even a real person, just an inconvenience taking up too much space in her curated world. At first, I tried to meet her halfway. I sent emails asking for guidance, filled out forms, even attended one of the HOA meetings to better understand the rules. Karen ran those meetings like a military operation. snapping through agenda items, shutting down dissent, and smiling while she did it. She used words like compliance, aesthetics, and property value the way other people use pleasantries. It was clear the HOA wasn't about helping neighbors, it was Karen's kingdom, and every crack in the sidewalk or toy left in the yard was a personal affront to her authority. She never raised her voice, never said anything directly cruel. That was her weapon, plausible deniability. She would tilt her head, sigh, and say, "It's not me, it's the rules." But somehow, those rules only seemed to apply to us. When another neighbor left their holiday lights up into February, nothing happened. But when Ava taped a handmade snowflake to our window, we received a warning letter the next day. When the Johnsons down the street installed a basketball hoop, Karen congratulated them at the next meeting. But when Ava rolled outside with a bubble wand, we got a complaint for excessive outdoor activity. It became clear Karen didn't see Ava as a child. She saw her as a disruption. And me? I was the irresponsible mother letting that disruption pollute her perfect little cul-de-sac. Her hostility escalated with every visit. One morning, I found her measuring the distance from our ramp to the curb with a yellow tape measure. When I opened the door and asked what she was doing, she gave me that brittle smile and said, "Just double-checking access clearance. The HOA has strict standards on pathway uniformity." Then she looked at Ava, who was peeking from behind the curtains, and added, "Sidewalk clutter is a safety hazard. We wouldn't want any accidents." It wasn't just a warning, it was a threat disguised as concern. She began documenting everything, taking photos of our yard, filming Ava from a distance, even asking other neighbors if they'd been disturbed by unusual noises or children playing too close to traffic. I once overheard her telling someone, "If we don't enforce the rules now, this place is going to start looking like a daycare." But Karen didn't care about rules, she cared about control. And nothing threatened that control more than a little girl in a wheelchair who dared to laugh, sing, and exist outside her definition of perfection. Karen had crowned herself queen of the HOA, and she was going to bend every blade of grass, every square inch of sidewalk, and every family under her thumb. And I was beginning to see she wasn't just trying to erase Ava's joy. She was trying to erase Ava altogether. It started with a note taped to the ramp. No envelope, no HOA letterhead, just a single sheet of white printer paper flapping in the wind, not up to code, violates uniform community design, subject to removal. No name, no signature, just that sterile threat. I knew exactly who had left it. No one else in the neighborhood stalked sidewalks with a clipboard and a measuring tape. The ramp had been there since move-in day, a simple wooden slope my brother and I built ourselves to ensure Ava could roll into the house without risking a fall on the uneven concrete step the builders had somehow overlooked. We'd even painted it the same color as the trim, made sure it sloped within safe guidelines, sanded it smooth to prevent splinters. It wasn't just legal, it was necessary. But to Karen, it was ugly, offensive, a visual stain on her perfectly curated view of the street. I took the note inside and tried to ignore it. But a week later, we received our first formal warning letter from HOA. It was written in that same cold, passive-aggressive language that masked cruelty behind concern. "This is your official notice of an architectural violation. Your ramp has not been reviewed or approved by the Design Compliance Committee. Per HOA bylaws, any exterior modification must adhere to aesthetic standards and community cohesion." Community cohesion. That was their favorite phrase, like our presence was an infection threatening to unbalance their illusion of perfection. I called the HOA office and explained that the ramp was medically necessary, that my daughter was disabled, and we'd cleared it with the previous property manager. The receptionist's tone instantly shifted. "You'll need to provide medical documentation and a request for retroactive approval," she said. "Otherwise, it may need to be removed." I hung up, hands trembling. The following week, Karen arrived on my doorstep, this time with a man in tow, tall, sunburned, carrying a construction clipboard. "This is Randy," she said, as if I should care. "He's evaluating the sidewalk alignment for a possible renovation. We've had complaints about uneven grading and cluttered pathways." That ramp of yours may need to come out. I blinked. That ramp is for my daughter. You can't just. We're not removing it, she interrupted, her tone calm but condescending. We're just reviewing alternatives. Something more aligned with the HOA's visual guidelines. Maybe a stone slab or recessed pathing. Of course, that would be at your expense. Randy said nothing, just looked around and scribbled something on his clipboard. I tried to speak again, but Karen cut me off with a fake, saccharine smile. Let's work together, shall we? We want what's best for everyone. And just like that, she walked away. A week later, 3 more letters came, one citing improper materials, one demanding architectural drawings, and one stating that failure to comply could result in daily fines. I felt like I was being suffocated by paper cuts. Ava didn't understand why the ramp was suddenly a problem. But, Mommy, I need it. I'll fall without it, she said one morning as I helped her into the car. I forced a smile. You won't fall, baby. I promise. But I didn't feel so sure anymore. That ramp had become a battleground, and Karen was waging war not with fists, but with bureaucracy. Then came the violation hearing. I was summoned to an HOA meeting, no lawyer, no mediator, just me sitting across a folding table from Karen and 3 of her handpicked board members, all nodding like bobbleheads while she read from her prepared statement. This structure, she said, gesturing to a blown-up photo of the ramp, is a clear deviation from the approved exterior design standards. It does not blend with the surrounding architecture. It reduces curb appeal and introduces risk of neighborhood property value decline. Property value. That's what my daughter's mobility meant to them, dollars and cents. When I mentioned the ADA, they smirked. One of them actually said, "We're not denying access. We're simply requesting it be made more visually appropriate." Karen added, "And of course, we're happy to offer suggestions for a compliant and harmonious alternative." I felt like I was on trial. Every defense I made was dismissed. Every word twisted. I left that meeting feeling smaller than I'd felt in years. But I wasn't going to take it lying down. I filed an ADA complaint. I posted the story anonymously on a neighborhood app. I called every disability rights group I could find, but nothing stopped Karen. One morning, I woke up to construction tape wrapped around the front walkway. No notice, no permission, just yellow tape and a spray-painted X on the sidewalk. I ran outside, heart racing, and saw 2 workers unloading tools. "We're here for the sidewalk leveling project," one said, "part of the HOA improvement plan." "That ramp is staying," I snapped. "It's not in the way." He shrugged. "We just do what we're told." And in the distance, like a shadow stitched to the neighborhood itself, Karen stood by the corner mailbox, sipping coffee and watching like a queen surveying a battlefield. She didn't smile this time. She didn't wave. She just stared. And I realized something I should have seen sooner. Karen didn't care about ramps. She didn't care about code. She cared about control. And this wasn't about a sidewalk. This was about removing the one thing that made her feel powerless, my daughter's existence. And now, she was about to turn concrete into a weapon. It began without warning, no letter, no HOA announcement, no courtesy knock on the door. Just the sudden roar of machines and the metallic clang of shovels against concrete one Monday morning. Jarring me awake before sunrise, I rushed to the front window, confused, heart already pounding, and was met with the sight of 3 men in hard hats digging directly in front of our home. The entire stretch of sidewalk from our driveway to the corner had been torn up. The ramp, our lifeline, was gone, shattered into splinters beside a heap of broken cement blocks. In its place was a jagged pit, nearly 6 feet wide and several feet deep, stretching right across the path where Ava wheeled up to enter our house every day. I stared, frozen, trying to process what I was seeing. Ava, still in pajamas, came rolling beside me and gasped, "Mommy, where's my ramp?" Her voice cracked, her eyes filled with worry. I didn't know what to say. I grabbed my coat and stormed outside barefoot, waving my arms at the nearest worker. "What is this? Who gave permission to tear up our walkway?" The man, probably in his 20s, looked startled and glanced at a clipboard. "Ma'am, It's part of the HOA Sidewalk improvement plan. Just following the work order. Improvement. I snapped. You've destroyed our only access point. My daughter is disabled. She can't even enter her own home now. He paused, looked at Ava watching from the window, and mumbled, I'm sorry, I do what I'm told. I scanned the area, desperately looking for anyone in charge, and that's when I saw her. Karen, standing across the street on her porch like a queen admiring her latest decree, arms folded, eyes smug with satisfaction. I stormed toward her, shaking with fury. Did you authorize this? I demanded. She blinked with mock innocence. It's all in the agenda minutes. Sidewalk upgrades were approved by the board last month. You were at the meeting, weren't you? I hadn't been. I had skipped that one because Ava had a fever and needed me. Karen knew that. She counted on it. This isn't an upgrade. I snapped. You tore out a medically necessary ramp without even informing us. Karen tilted her head like I was a confused child. It wasn't HOA approved, and the sidewalk needed to be leveled for drainage. We can't compromise neighborhood safety for personal modifications, can we? The word personal hit like a slap. I was shaking. You're putting my daughter at risk. Karen didn't flinch. Then perhaps you should have followed the process like everyone else. I wanted to scream, to throw something to grab her by the collar and drag her to the pit so she could see what she'd done. But I couldn't risk losing control. I turned back to our house to find Ava, now stuck halfway in the yard, unable to roll forward because the grass was too soft and the sidewalk was gone. Her little hands were clenched tight on the wheels, and her face was twisted in frustration and fear. I ran to her and lifted her chair manually over the grass, tears burning in my eyes. It's okay, baby, I whispered. We'll fix this. I promise. But fixing it wouldn't be easy. For the next 3 days, the pit grew deeper and longer. They brought in trucks, rebar, bags of cement. The workers told me the sidewalk was being completely modernized, yet not a single other house on the street had any digging. Just ours. Just Ava's ramp. I asked them again and again, where's the plan, the schedule, the notice? They shrugged. We just do what the HOA tells us. The pit became a trap. There was no way for Ava to leave the house on her own. We were prisoners inside. Every time she looked out the window, her smile faded a little more. She asked if she did something wrong. I told her no, but even she started to see through the lie. Why does the sidewalk hate me? She asked quietly one night. I didn't have an answer. By day 4, the digging stopped, but the pit remained, untouched, open, wide enough to swallow a child whole. A piece of yellow caution tape fluttered lazily in the wind, doing nothing to block off the hazard. I contacted the city ADA hotlines, even a local news station, but the red tape was endless. Private HOA property, they all said. Internal construction. Out of our jurisdiction. Karen knew exactly how to play the system, and she was winning. The final straw came that weekend. Ava wanted to go outside to feel the sun on her face. I carried her down the front steps and set her wheelchair gently in the grass, warning her not to get too close to the pit. She nodded, trying to be brave, clutching her stuffed bunny in one hand. I went back inside to grab sunscreen. I swear it was less than 30 seconds. When I returned, Ava was gone. My heart stopped. I dropped everything and sprinted outside. Then I heard it, a faint, muffled cry. I turned toward the construction site and saw her, clinging to the edge of the trench, her wheelchair tilted on the rim, one wheel hanging in midair over the gaping pit. I screamed her name and ran, grabbing her arm just as the chair tipped. She slid halfway into the hole, her legs disappearing into the cement dust and dirt. I pulled her out with every ounce of strength I had, sobbing, shaking, holding her so tight I couldn't tell where she ended, and I began. She was covered in dust, coughing, terrified. I slipped, she whispered. I didn't mean to. I was just looking. My knees gave out. I sat on the ground holding her, rocking back and forth, my body shaking with rage and relief. That's when Karen walked by. She didn't speak. She didn't stop. She just glanced at us, at the pit, at my crying daughter, and smirked. Not a smile, a smirk. as if she had finally proven her point, as if we were nothing more than a blemish that needed to be paved over. That's when I knew this wasn't about rules or ramps or sidewalks. This was about elimination. She wanted my daughter gone, and she was willing to bury her to make that happen. It was supposed to be just another morning, the kind where we'd learn to live carefully, me watching Ava like a hawk, her learning to exist inside a box Karen had drawn with invisible lines around her home. I had just stepped away for a moment to take a phone call in the kitchen, with Ava sitting safely outside in her wheelchair near the front step, watching the butterflies dance over our flower bed. The cement pit was still open, stretching like a wound across the sidewalk, untouched for days. I had warned Ava not to go near it, and she listened always. But this time, something changed. I heard yelling, muffled at first, then sharp, chaotic. I dropped the phone and ran to the door, heart slamming against my chest, and what I saw will be burned into my memory until the day I die. Ava was in the pit. My baby, my disabled little girl, was submerged waist deep in thick, wet cement, her arms flailing, her face twisted in panic as she screamed for me, for anyone to help her. Her wheelchair lay on its side, several feet away, its wheels coated in slush and gravel. Around the trench, two construction workers stood frozen, horrified, unsure what to do. One of them held a chute, still dripping with wet cement. The other kept glancing back toward the corner of the street, and that's when I saw her. Karen, standing just outside the caution line with her arms folded and her eyes locked on the pit like a general surveying a battlefield. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look scared. She looked satisfied. I screamed Ava's name so loudly it tore something in my throat, sprinting across the yard like a woman possessed. The workers shouted, but I didn't hear them. All I could see was my daughter, trapped in cement up to her belly, her tiny hands clawing through the thick gray mixture that was already beginning to dry. Her cries turned into gasps. The sludge was pulling her down. I jumped into the pit without thinking, the wet cement swallowing my legs, burning my skin with its chemical heat. I reached Ava and gripped her under her arms, trying to pull her free, but the cement was like quicksand, thick, angry, unforgiving. She was stuck. I screamed at the workers to help, and finally, one of them dropped the chute and leapt in beside me. We didn't know she was there, he shouted. She wasn't supposed to be in zone. But his eyes weren't on me. They were on Karen, who hadn't moved an inch. She said to keep pouring. He muttered under his breath. She said the kid shouldn't be there. She said, just pour. I could barely process it. My hands were raw, my body shaking. I wrapped Ava's arms around my neck and begged the other worker to help dig. The concrete was hardening by the second. Every second mattered. The EMTs arrived within minutes, but it felt like hours. A neighbor had called 911. Thank God. They used crowbars and trowels to break the cement around Ava's legs. She screamed with every movement, her skin already turning red from a burn. The paramedics wrapped her in blankets, cut away her soaked clothes, and gave her oxygen as they strapped her to a stretcher. She was crying so softly now, too tired to speak, her fingers twitching in my hand. I was covered in cement, my pants soaked, my shoes ruined, my arms blistered. But I didn't care. All I could think was, she could have died. My daughter could have suffocated in a hole that didn't need to exist, poured full of poison on the word of a woman who saw her as nothing more than noise, clutter, a problem. And Karen? As they wheeled Ava away, I turned and looked for her. She was gone. No trace. No apology. No explanation. Just a pit of cement, erect wheelchair, and a little girl with burns down her legs because a woman with a grudge had the power to give orders no one questioned. At the hospital, the doctors cleaned Ava's skin and treated her for chemical burns, minor cement inhalation, and shock. The damage wasn't permanent, but the trauma was. She didn't speak for 3 days. She just held her bunny and stared out the window, flinching every time a construction truck drove by on the street below. I sat beside her the entire time, haunted by the image of her sinking into that pit while adults stood around with shovels and excuses. And I kept asking myself one question: how many people had to choose silence for this to happen? How many workers, neighbors, and board members looked away while Karen built her kingdom of cruelty? And what would it take to tear it down? The silence after the incident was worse than the scream that had started it all. It was thick, calculated, unnatural, like the whole neighborhood had agreed to press mute on the truth. The very next morning, before I could even take a breath, an official email from the HOA landed in my inbox. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even concern. It was a clinical, dismissive paragraph titled Community Incident Clarification, stating that an unfortunate accident occurred near ongoing sidewalk repairs and that all construction zones are considered off-limits to residents and guests for their own safety. No names, no accountability, no mention of my daughter being poured into wet cement while Karen watched from the sidewalk like it was a show. They referred to Ava's trauma, her burns, her panic, her near-death experience, as if it were a minor inconvenience, like she had tripped over a crack instead of being deliberately entombed. I responded instantly, demanding an investigation, screaming into the void of a monitored inbox. Hours passed. Then a reply came, short, defensive, sterile. Thank you for your concern. The HOA board has reviewed preliminary accounts and determined that proper signage and tape were in place. We are not liable for misuse of a restricted area. Misuse? My disabled daughter didn't misuse a cement pit. She fell into it, and someone, Karen, ordered them to keep pouring. That same afternoon, I saw Karen in the lobby. She had a clipboard tucked under her arm, her hair perfectly in place, a smug calm radiating off her like cheap perfume. She didn't avoid me. No, she walked right up and said, "How's the little one? Hope she recovers." Though, honestly, if you'd been more responsible, maybe this could have been avoided. I stood there frozen, cement still under my fingernails, my daughter still lying in a hospital bed, and this woman, this monster, had the audacity to frame it as my fault. I wanted to scream, to slap her. But instead, I took a deep breath, stepped back, and walked away. Because I knew then what I had to do. Karen wasn't going to admit guilt. The HOA wasn't going to protect us. The neighbors weren't going to speak up. Everyone wanted the problem, us, to disappear. But I wasn't going to let them rewrite this narrative. I was done playing nice. I started documenting everything. I printed every HOA email, every violation letter, every community memo that mentioned construction dates and Karen's name. I took photos of the pit before it was filled, of the caution tape fluttering uselessly, of Ava's broken wheelchair lying beside the rubble like the skeleton of her freedom. I called the construction crew and recorded a phone call with one of the younger workers, the one who had hesitated. He sounded nervous, but he confirmed what I already knew. She told us to keep pouring. We didn't know the kid was there, but she saw. She said do it anyway. I reached out to neighbors, quietly, carefully. Most didn't respond. Some sent curt texts back, saying they didn't want to get involved. One woman even said, "I just think there's a lot of emotion around this, and we should let the HOA handle it." Let the HOA handle it? They were the problem. They were Karen's stage, her shield, her echo chamber. But not everyone stayed silent. An older couple, Mr. and Mrs. Evans from 2 houses down, called me late one night. "We saw her that day," Mrs. Evans whispered. She wasn't shocked. She watched it happen. "We were afraid to speak up, but what she did to your daughter was evil." I recorded the call. I filed a formal complaint with the city. I started building a file, so thick it couldn't be ignored. But every step forward felt like dragging myself through cement all over again. The HOA stonewalled me at every turn. Karen filed a complaint against me for defamation and community disruption. She called me unstable, said I was inciting tension in a peaceful neighborhood. The narrative had shifted from a mother trying to protect her child to a woman causing problems where there were none. I was being gaslit by an entire system built to protect people like her. But I didn't flinch, because I had the truth. And I had Ava's pain, her silence, her scars burned into my memory. They wanted this to disappear. They wanted us to give up. But I was done playing their game. I wasn't going to beg for justice anymore. I was going to take it. Filing the lawsuit wasn't just about Ava anymore. It was about drawing a line in the cement that nearly swallowed her, about sending a message that we would not be erased, ignored, or intimidated into silence. I knew we were going up against a fortress, the HOA, its board, its army of rules, and the woman at the center of it all, Karen, who had ruled the neighborhood like a tyrant in beige slacks and wedge heels. I found a lawyer who didn't blink when I told her everything. Her name was Angela, a civil rights attorney with fire in her voice and a history of holding HOAs accountable. They think you're weak because you're a single mother, she said after our first meeting. Let's show them what strength looks like. And just like that, we began. We filed a civil lawsuit naming both Karen and the HOA for negligence, gross misconduct, reckless endangerment, and violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The case was built on more than emotion. It was built on records, photos, interviews, and the truth. Angela compiled every HOA notice, every neighbor testimony, the hospital records detailing Ava's injuries, and most damning of all, the audio recordings of the worker admitting Karen told them to keep pouring. We were told the kid shouldn't be there, he had said, but she saw her. She said to keep going. That sentence alone changed everything. When the lawsuit was served, Karen acted outraged. She marched straight into the community center during an emergency HOA meeting and called it a smear campaign. She said I was hysterical, that Ava had wandered into the pit unsupervised, and that it's tragic, but not the HOA's fault. The board rallied around her at first. They issued statements about waiting for due process and maintaining community integrity. But I didn't back down. I took the story public. I contacted every news station I could, posted on community forums, tagged disability advocacy groups, and uploaded Ava's story to a YouTube channel I created that very night, the HOA Stories. I shared the details, the pit, the pour, the silence that followed. Within days, the story went viral. Viewers from all over the country commented, shared their own HOA horror stories, and flooded the HOA's public page with demands for accountability. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Ava and hashtag Stop HOA Abuse began trending locally. People sent letters, emails, even donations to help cover our legal fees. The pressure mounted, and the HOA panicked. They tried to settle, twice. The first offer came with hush clauses. They wanted us to take a payout, remove the videos, delete the recordings, and sign a non-disclosure agreement. Angela laughed when she read it. They're scared, she said. That means we're getting close. We rejected the offer. The second came with a slightly higher check and veiled language about compassion and cooperation. But there was no compassion in what they'd done. And I wasn't interested in quiet cooperation. I was interested in accountability. So we pressed on. The depositions were brutal. Karen showed up in pearls and played the victim. She said she'd never intentionally endangered anyone, that she'd only followed procedure. But the evidence was undeniable. The timeline, the photos, the witnesses, the construction orders signed off by her name, the fact that no other home on the street had any sidewalk work done. She was cornered, and for the first time, I saw cracks in her confidence. She stammered when Angela played the audio. She flinched when shown photos of Ava's burns. And when asked directly, did you ever instruct workers to continue cement pouring despite seeing a child near the trench? She refused to answer. Her lawyer objected. The silence said more than any words could. The court case dragged on for months, but we were relentless. The media coverage grew. Disability rights organizations filed amicus briefs supporting us. Other families from the same neighborhood came forward with their own stories of harassment, intimidation, and silence. Karen's kingdom began to crumble. One by one, HOA board members resigned. Sponsors pulled out. Even the construction company issued a public apology, stating they were misled about the nature of the project. When the verdict finally came, it felt like exhaling after months underwater. The court found the HOA and Karen jointly liable. We were awarded damages, not just for Ava's medical expenses and emotional trauma, but for punitive harm, civil rights violations, and negligent endangerment. Karen was banned from holding any HOA leadership position again. The HOA was ordered to revise its bylaws, undergo mandatory ADA training, and issue a public apology. But more than that, the truth was on record. Ava's story couldn't be denied, erased, or rewritten. It was inked in court transcripts, broadcast across the country, etched into the internet where thousands of people now knew our names, not as victims, but as survivors. And I looked at my daughter sitting in her rebuilt wheelchair with a proud smile on her face and thought, you did this. You made them listen. This wasn't just a win for us. It was a warning to every HOA that hides behind rules to justify cruelty. You can't silence the people you try to bury. Some of us grow roots. Some of us rise. When the court ruling came down and Karen's reign finally cracked into pieces, it didn't feel like victory, not at first. It felt like release, like someone had finally taken their foot off our chest after months of suffocating silence and legal suffocation. The HOA was forced to issue a formal apology, their board replaced by a new leadership team chosen with oversight from the city's Housing Ethics Council. Karen, stripped of her title and dignity, was ordered to pay damages alongside the HOA and barred from serving in any leadership role in any HOA for life. But even more than that, she became a public symbol of everything broken in these gated systems that pretend to protect peace while enabling quiet cruelty. Her name trended for days, not with sympathy, but with condemnation. While she vanished into whatever hole people like her crawl back into, we stayed. Not in the same house. We left that place the second Ava was strong enough to travel, but we didn't disappear. Not this time. We moved to a nearby community that didn't have a homeowners association, where kids ride their bikes at sunset and chalk drawings don't get reported as violations, where ramps are not an eyesore but a welcome mat for inclusion, where no one stares when a little girl in a glitter-covered wheelchair spins in circles laughing at the sky. Ava healed slowly but completely. The burns on her legs faded, but not without leaving faint scars, and even those she began to embrace. She started calling them her warrior marks. She told her new teacher that her wheelchair wasn't for disability, but for adventure mode. She even helped me design a new ramp at her home, choosing colors and laying stickers down its railings to make it hers. She sings again now, louder than ever. At night, she asks me to play her favorite songs while she dances in circles under the porch light. And every time I hear her laugh, I remember that day, the pit, the cement, the silence. I remember what almost was, and I thank whatever strength lived in her that kept her alive. I'm not the same woman I was before this happened. I used to apologize when I took up space. I used to whisper when my daughter cried in public. Now, I speak louder. I look people in the eye. I fight harder for Ava, for kids like her, for mothers like me who are told to sit down, comply, and not make waves. I didn't choose this fight, but I'm damn sure going to finish it. And we're not done. The HOA Stories has become more than just a name, it's a movement. People from all across the country write to me, sharing their own stories of abuse, discrimination, retaliation. Families silenced, children punished, mothers humiliated, but no more. We shine light on what hides behind trimmed hedges and pristine sidewalks. We speak for those who've been told to be quiet. Karen thought she could bury us in cement, thought that by pouring silence over injustice, the truth would disappear. But she underestimated something powerful: love, fury, and the voice of a mother who will burn down the walls before letting her child suffer in silence again. We didn't just rebuild. We laid a new foundation, one made of courage, truth, and the promise that no matter how clean the rules look on paper, no one gets to harm our children and walk away unseen. Not anymore. If you've made it this far, then you've seen what happens when power is unchecked, when silence is weaponized, and when a child's safety is sacrificed in the name of control. This wasn't just my story. This wasn't just Ava's story. This is your story too, because there are Karens everywhere. They hide behind rule books. They smile at town halls. They weaponize HOAs, policies, and architectural guidelines to exclude the people they don't want to see: the loud, the different, the disabled, the poor, the bold. But we are done being quiet. We are done being polite. We are done being scared. The HOA Stories exists because people like us need a place to be heard. A place where the victims of HOA abuse, discrimination, and power hunger can speak without fear. We tell the stories they try to bury. We expose the bullies behind the bushes. And we will not stop, not until families like mine, like yours, like so many others, can finally live without fear of retaliation for just existing. So, if you've ever been harassed by your HOA, bullied by a board member, fined for your child's sidewalk chalk, or silenced because you dare to speak up, this is your channel. Tell your story in the comments. Share this video. Subscribe to the HOA Stories and join a growing community that's shining a light where the shadows used to rule. Because if they can bury one of us, they'll try to bury all of us. But not today. Not anymore. We are the foundation now, and we are not going anywhere.